Hello everyone and welcome back to the last and final episode of my Git trip series. In this concluding part of my journey, I'm aboard the 20966 Superfast Intercity Express heading towards Ahmedabad. It is around 8 o'clock in the morning and we have just started departing from Botad Junction station. From here, our train will take the newly converted Botad Ahmedabad broad gauge line, offering a faster and shorter route to our destination. We expect to reach Ahmedabad in another 2 to 3 hours. This particular route holds immense historical significance. The stretch from Botad Junction to Sabarmati Junction was once a vital part of the grand meter-gauge network of the Western Railway. Back in those days, this line provided seamless direct connectivity from Veraval Junction and Porbandar port to Ahmedabad, passing through Jitalsar Junction. One of the most iconic trains of that era, the Somnath Mail, used this route. The train would start from Veraval Junction, travel through Junagadh and Jitalsar main line, and then it would take a branch line section via Khijadia Junction station and Dhasa Junction to reach Dhola Junction station. From Dhola, it would join the Botad bound main line and finally proceeding towards Ahmedabad via Dholka. Now there is something interesting. Many long distance meter gauge trains originating from Saurashtra, like those trains coming from Okha port, Jamnagar or Rajkot, they could not directly reach Ahmedabad. This was due to the permanent break of gauge at Viramgam Junction station, as the stretch from Viramgam to Ahmedabad had always been on the broad gauge system. As a result, the meter gauge trains from Okha port used to go towards Mehsana Junction, where they would actually terminate. Back in the golden meter gauge era, there was even a slip-through coach service running from Okha port, which would get attached to the iconic 2-down meter gauge Delhi Mail train at Mehsana Junction station, an amazing piece of railway logistics. But unlike those trains, services from Veraval and Porbandar port had a direct meter gauge route to Ahmedabad via this Botad Sabarmati line, making it quite a special corridor. Now coming to modern times, when the Bhavnagar to Dhola and further to Botad stretch got converted to broad gauge, gauge conversion works continued northwards towards Surendranagar, linking with the Rajkot Ahmedabad broad gauge mainline traffic. This provided Bhavnagar broad gauge access to Ahmedabad, but only through a longer route via Surendranagar and Viramgam section. Unfortunately, this left the Botad Ahmedabad meter gauge section isolated, breaking through links from the vast meter gauge network that came via Dhola Junction from the Gir region, Amreli, Veraval and Porbandar port. However, the mainline section from Veraval to Rajkot via Jitalsar underwent gauge conversion in the early 2000s, but in my view, Dhola-Botad section could have either retained dual gauge tracks or MGBG parallel lines, allowing the continuation of meter gauge trains from the Gir belt, Veraval, Delwada, etc. to Ahmedabad. This would have maintained passenger convenience during the transitional period. I remember travelling back in 2017 when the Dhasa-Dhola stretch had already been converted to broad gauge. The meter gauge trains were terminating at Dhasa Junction station. Eventually, Khijadia-Dhasa stretch was also upgraded, allowing through BG connectivity from Jitalsar to Dhola Junction. Now before gauge conversion works reached the Bhavnagar docks, Bhavnagar was directly connected to Ahmedabad on the meter gauge system via the Botad Sabarmati line. but post the gauge conversion, the broad gauge trains starting from Bhavnagar had to go via Botad Surendranagar Viramgam rail passage to reach Ahmedabad, adding to the distance. The Botad Ahmedabad meter-gauge line remained functional till around July 2017 when heavy monsoon rains had impacted the section, prompting its closure and gauge conversion works. I remember spotting the remnants of this meter-gauge line while aboard the Bikaner Express heading to Kerala. Those memories still feel fresh. And now finally with the broad gauge line fully operational between Botad and Sabarmati Junction, trains like the 20966 Intercity Superfast Express on which I am currently travelling can run directly from Bhavnagar to Ahmedabad through this shorter route, saving both time and distance. The total travel distance now stands at approximately 250 kilometers, a great improvement over the earlier lengthier detour. Now we start approaching Dhandhuka station. It is the next major halt station after departing from Botad Junction station towards Ahmedabad line. Now, as our train slowly rolls into Dhandhuka station, I spot another broad gauge train patiently waiting on the opposite track, hauled by an EMD diesel locomotive. By the look of it, this train must be heading towards Bhavnagar side. This actually reminds me the Botad to Ahmedabad section is still being worked under the diesel traction, as electrification has not been commissioned yet. The line was, after all, only recently converted from meter gauge to broad gauge, and overhead equipment installation is still pending. The presence of diesel traction adds a nostalgic charm to the section, taking us back to the pre-electrification days when the chugging diesel locomotives ruled these routes.
हेलो, क्या सीट है आपका? जनरल आगे है, चलिए। हाँ चलिए।
હવે જે રેલવે સ્ટેશન હશે ને
As we continue our journey on the newly laid broad gauge line from Botad to Ahmedabad, I must say it's an absolute breather. The landscape opens up into vast, arid plains typical of the Saurashtra terrain. There is a certain raw beauty in this stretch. The dry grasslands stretching to the horizon, clusters of babool trees dotting the scenery, and occasionally, if you look closely, you can still spot the remnants of the old meter gauge alignment running parallel in some patches. It is these subtle throwbacks to history that make this journey truly special. With the early morning sun casting a golden hue across the land, the cool breeze coming in through the windows, and the rhythmic hum of the rails, this section offers pure bliss for any railway lover or traveler. It is not just a ride, it's a moment of connection between the past and the present. As we move deeper into the stretch between Botad and Ahmedabad, the landscape really starts playing with your imagination. It feels straight out of a Bollywood classic, and I cannot help but be reminded of the iconic Sholay train chase scene. The vast arid plains scattered with thorny bushes, the endless openness around. It is easy to imagine dacoits galloping on horseback, closing in on the train, trying to board it. In my mind, Viro is up in the locomotive, urging it to go faster, and Jay, perched at the rear caboose, rifle in hand, keeping a sharp lookout. That raw energy of steam and steel, danger and drama, it is pure cinematic thrill. Bollywood and Indian Railways, they have always shared a deep bond. From romance to action to emotion, trains have played a starring role in countless films. For every train lover like me, it adds that extra layer of magic to the journey. To our left, you can see what appears to be the old metre-gauge alignment, now lying silently as if watching our broad gauge train pass by with quiet dignity. This was once the lifeline of metre-gauge trains that connected Veraval, Porbandar and Bhavnagar directly to Ahmedabad through this very path. Today, while the broad gauge line carries us forward steadily, that old alignment still runs parallel in sections a gentle reminder of the legacy and history of Indian Railways. It is fascinating to see past and the present coexist, one active, one abandoned, yet both part of the same story. For a rail enthusiast like me, it's like watching time unfold track by track. Now we begin to approach Dholka station, a familiar name on this historic stretch. From here, Ahmedabad is not too far. We are in the final leg of our journey. It has been an incredible ride so far, traversing through the heart of Saurashtra, catching glimpses of the former Metre-gauge alignment, soaking in the wild open landscapes, and now inching closer to one of Gujarat's biggest cities. From Botad to Dholka, this newly converted broad gauge line hasn't just shortened distances but also revived old railway memories for those who remember the good old meter gauge days. And now we have finally entered the suburbs of Ahmedabad city. The scenery around us has completely transformed. From open arid plains and silent stretches, we are now surrounded by factories, residential colonies, and rising apartment blocks. The signs of urban life are unmistakable. It is amazing to think how far we have come, from the heart of Saurashtra's countryside to the bustling edge of Gujarat's largest city. The train steadily pushes forward as we prepare to wrap up this incredible rail journey. Now we are pulling into Vastrapur station. Vastrapur is one of the suburban areas in Ahmedabad city and would be the last station before we reach Gandhigram station, where our train would be terminating. And now our train begins to pull into Gandhigram station located in the heart of Ahmedabad city. This is where the train number 20966 Sabarmati Intercity Express terminates, marking the end of our rail journey. As for me, I would be getting off here and booking a Rapido Taxi to Ahmedabad Junction, which is just a short ride from the station. From there, I would be boarding the Okha Ernakulam Express as I would begin my return journey to my hometown in Kerala. Now I have boarded taxi from Gandhigram station to Ahmedabad Junction. With this, my gear trip series comes to a close. A journey filled with adventure, history, scenic landscapes, and a lot of railway nostalgia. This was the final episode of the gear trip series, and I truly hope you have enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you have followed this series and liked what you saw, please do like, share and subscribe to the channel. You can also find the entire gear trip series neatly organized in the playlist section. So feel free to watch them in sequence and relive the full journey. Thank you once again for joining me on this memorable train ride. I will be back very soon within a week with another exciting rail adventure. Until then, take care, stay safe and goodbye.